Have you ever felt like the more you think, the more isolated you become? Like the deeper your thoughts go, the less people seem to understand, or even want to listen. That feeling isn't just in your head. History tells us that society has always been uncomfortable with deep thinkers. Not because they were wrong, but because they saw things most people didn't want to see. From Socrates to Galileo, from Nietzsche to Tesla, brilliant minds throughout time have been ridiculed, silenced, or simply ignored. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because their insights made people uneasy. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, even believed intelligence to be a truce that isolates those who see the world too clearly. But why is this? Why does society push away people who think differently? The answer lies deep in human psychology. Think about it. When you stand next to someone who's physically stronger, you might admire them. When you meet someone wealthy, you might envy them. But when you meet someone intellectually sharper than you, something strange happens. It's called the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just bring new ideas to the table. They reflect back the limitations of everyone around them. And let's be honest, people don't like being reminded of their limitations. Even when the deep thinker says nothing, their mute presence can make others feel exposed, inferior, uncomfortable. And here's the real twist. This discomfort isn't logical. It's biological. When someone challenges what we believe or understand, the brain treats it like a threat. It activates the amygdala, the same part of the brain that reacts to physical danger. In other words, our survival instincts kick in, not because someone is throwing punches, but because they're throwing around ideas that shake the ground we stand on. Deep thinkers unknowingly disrupt social balance. They question what most people take for granted. And while that might sound noble, it can feel like a direct attack to others. An attack on their identity, their sense of certainty, even their self-worth. That's why deep thinkers are often pushed to the fringes. Not because they're arrogant or antisocial, but because they force others to confront things they'd rather ignore. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And humans? We'll do just about anything to protect our egos. Now pause and reflect on your own life for a second. Have you ever brought up a deep idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with silence or confusion? Have you ever watched people quickly change the subject when things got too real? That's not coincidence. That's a defense mechanism. Instead of leaning in, most people lean out. Instead of engaging with depth, they retreat to comfort. That's why so many philosophers, scientists, and visionary thinkers end up feeling lonely. Not because they want to be alone, but because they're consistently misunderstood. And here's something really interesting. Confidence is often more valued than intelligence in social settings. You've probably noticed it yourself. People gravitate toward those who speak with certainty, even if what they're saying is surface level. Meanwhile, thinkers who speak with nuance, who say it depends, or this is complicated, often get ignored. That's why charismatic, simple thinkers often rise to the top. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, viral influencers, they don't ask you to think. They tell you what you already believe. That feels good. It feels easy. But it comes at a cost. Depth gets left behind. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more they risk becoming disconnected from the majority. Deep thinkers don't just reflect the flaws in other people, they reflect the limits of society itself. And most people, whether they realize it or not, are wired to protect what they know, not to challenge it. But is there actual science behind this? Do people really fear intelligence? Modern neuroscience says yes. Studies have shown that when people feel intellectually inferior, the threat centers of the brain light up. Their amygdala, the fear detector, activates. So encountering someone smart isn't just intimidating. It actually triggers the same primal fear response as a physical threat. But why would a smart person set off that kind of fear? To answer that, we need to go way back to our ancestors. For most of human history, survival wasn't about being the smartest. It was about belonging. Humans thrived in tribes. If you were cast out, you were vulnerable. You could die. That's why our brains evolved to prioritize social harmony over intellectual growth. So today, when someone highly intelligent walks into a room and starts asking hard questions or breaking group norms, the brain doesn't say, "Wow, how fascinating." It says, "Oh, this person's a threat." And that threat only grows in group settings. A 2021 study from Stanford showed that people feel far less threatened by intelligent individuals in one-on-one conversations. But in group situations, that threat response spikes. Why? Because group dynamics come into play. Social status suddenly matters more. If someone feels outshined in front of others, they'll instinctively push back, maybe with sarcasm, dismissal, or subtle exclusion. Not because the deep thinker did anything wrong, but because their presence challenges the group's pecking order. This is why many intellectuals can have amazing private conversations, but struggle in larger social spaces. There are also a few mental traps, cognitive biases, that make things worse. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability often think they're smarter than they are, while truly intelligent people tend to doubt themselves. That creates friction. The less someone knows, the more confident they feel, so they end up dismissing deeper thinkers without realizing it. Status quo bias. The brain prefers familiar ideas over complex or new ones. Deep thinkers introduce disruptive concepts that threaten comfort and predictability. The backfire effect. When people are presented with evidence that contradicts their beliefs, they don't reconsider. They dig in. They double down. They resist. All of these psychological forces combine to create an environment where intellectual depth isn't just underappreciated, it's actively resisted. And in today's world, social media amplifies that resistance. Algorithms reward engagement, not depth. The content that spreads fastest? It's short, emotional, often controversial or funny. In other words, viral. But nuanced, thought-provoking ideas? They take time. They require reflection. And they don't generate as many clicks. This is why deep thinkers often struggle online. Their ideas can't be boiled down into catchy sound bites or 15-second clips. And that means they get drowned out by noise. But this isn't just a tech problem. It's part of a bigger pattern. The rejection of deep thinking starts early, in our institutions, in our culture, even in our schools. Have you ever tried to share a deep or complex thought in a casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares, awkward silence, or someone quickly changing the topic? That's not just bad timing. It's actually a psychological defense mechanism at play. See, when you bring up something that challenges someone's worldview, especially in a group setting, you're not just introducing a new idea. You're unintentionally shining a light on their own limitations. And most people don't like that. In fact, they resist it. Not because you're being condescending, but because your presence makes them reflect on things they'd rather avoid. This phenomenon has been backed by science. A 2021 study out of Stanford University found something really interesting. People generally don't feel threatened by deep thinkers in one-on-one conversations. But put that same thinker in a group setting, and suddenly the discomfort level spikes. Why? Because group dynamics are all about social status. When someone smart enters the room, others subconsciously worry about how they're being perceived in comparison. In other words, it's not just about what you say, it's about how others feel when you say it. If they feel intellectually outshined, they may respond not with curiosity, but with subtle dismissal, deflection, or even hostility. Not because you're wrong, but because you're too right, too soon. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. When someone's depth of thought unintentionally reflects back another person's intellectual insecurities. And unlike physical strength or wealth, intelligence has a unique power. It challenges the ego. An ego is a fragile thing. A few well-documented cognitive biases help explain why this happens. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability often overestimate their competence, while highly intelligent people tend to doubt themselves. That means those who know the least are often the most confident and most resistant to correction. When a deep thinker enters the room, it disrupts that illusion. Status quo bias. The human brain craves familiarity. New, complex ideas feel like a threat, especially when they contradict long-held beliefs. People cling to what they know, even if it's wrong, because it's comfortable. The backfire effect. When people are confronted with evidence that contradicts their beliefs, they don't usually change their minds. Instead, they double down. This makes it incredibly difficult for thoughtful, well-reasoned insights to gain traction, especially in a world that rewards certainty over nuance. And it's not just psychology, it's also technology. In today's digital world, algorithms reward what gets attention, not what promotes truth or depth. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok prioritize content that sparks engagement. And you know what triggers the most engagement? Outrage, humor, and controversy. Not complexity. So while a deep thinker might spend weeks crafting a nuanced idea, someone else posts a one-liner filled with buzzwords and emotion, and that goes viral. Why? Because it's easy to digest. And in a world saturated with information, simplicity wins. This is what makes social media so frustrating for deep thinkers. The more thoughtful your content, the harder it is to condense it into catchy headlines or viral clips. The algorithm doesn't reward depth, it rewards dopamine. This rejection of deep thinking doesn't begin on social media, though. It starts much earlier. Let's talk about schools. Education systems claim to encourage critical thinking, but in reality, they often do the opposite. Students are rewarded for obedience, memorization, and conformity. Those who challenge the teacher, ask too many questions, or think too far outside the box, they're often labeled as troublemakers, not visionaries. And then there's the corporate world. Innovation is a buzzword, but true innovation? That's risky. It threatens existing systems. So companies tend to promote people who fit the culture, not those who challenge it. Deep thinkers often struggle here, not because they're not competent, but because they refuse to play shallow political games. Even in politics, the story is the same. Leaders who simplify everything into black and white slogans tend to win. Why? Because their messages are easy to understand and easy to repeat. Meanwhile, thinkers who offer complex but honest views get dismissed as out of touch, elitist, or too academic. Not because they're wrong, but because their truth requires effort to understand. Think about the pattern here. Society claims to value intelligence, but only after it's safe. Let's go back in time for a moment. Galileo proved the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. That shattered centuries of religious belief. And how did society respond? They locked him under house arrest. Today, we call him a genius. Back then, they called him a heretic. Vincent van Gogh painted over 2,000 works, yet sold only one while he was alive. He died alone and broke. Now his paintings are priceless. What changed? Not the art, society. Nikola Tesla imagined wireless electricity and free energy for all. But the powers that be, industrialists like Edison and Morgan, saw him as a threat to profit. Tesla died in a hotel room, penniless, while others profited from his stolen ideas. Alan Turing saved millions of lives in World War II through code breaking. His work laid the foundation for modern computing. But because he was gay, he was chemically castrated by the British government. He died by suicide. Today he's hailed as a hero. But when he needed support, society failed him. Hypatia of Alexandria, a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, was one of the earliest female intellectuals in history. She was murdered by a mob because her teachings threatened religious authority. What do all these stories have in common? They were too ahead of their time, and society wasn't ready. We love to celebrate deep thinkers, just not when they're alive. Because when someone is alive and challenging our beliefs, it makes us uncomfortable. But when they're gone, and their ideas no longer pose a threat, we rewrite the narrative. We turn them into heroes. So what does this mean for you? If you're someone who thinks deeply, it means you're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not weird. You're just wired to seek truth, and society isn't always built for that. But that doesn't mean you have to live in isolation. In fact, there are ways to navigate the world without compromising your depth. And that's exactly what we'll dive into in the next section. How deep thinkers can survive and even thrive in a world that often resists them. So you're a deep thinker living in a shallow world. What now? You can't exactly change the entire system overnight. But you can learn how to navigate it without losing yourself. The goal isn't to dumb yourself down. It's to protect your depth while learning how to communicate it strategically. It's about learning how to speak both languages, your own and the one the world understands. Here's how. 1. Stop expecting everyone to understand you. This is hard to swallow, but it's liberating once you do. Most people will never fully get you. Not because you're better than them, but because your mind operates on a different frequency. Expecting everyone to meet you, that will only lead to loneliness and disappointment. Instead, focus on finding your people. You don't need everyone to understand you. You just need a few who do. Whether it's a close friend, an online community, or even a mentor, build your circle intentionally. One real connection is worth more than 100 surface-level ones. 2. Master the art of translating depth. You've probably had this happen. You share a brilliant insight, and people either ignore it or look confused. But then someone else shares the same idea, watered down, and everyone claps. That's not theft. That's translation. Deep thinkers often speak in essays. The world listens and tweets. So here's the trick. Simplify the entry point, not the idea. Think of it like leading someone down a staircase. Start on their level, not yours. Use metaphors. Use questions. Use stories. Once they're hooked, then go deeper. Truth doesn't have to be diluted. It just needs to be accessible. 3. Learn emotional calibration. You might be right. You might have the facts. But if you trigger someone's defenses, it won't matter. They'll shut down before they hear you. This is why emotional intelligence is key. It's not about being manipulative, it's about being aware. Learn to read the room. Know when to push, when to pause, and when to listen. Sometimes, letting someone feel heard is more powerful than being right. Remember, people change when they feel safe, not when they feel stupid. 4. Let go of the need to prove. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. Let that sink in. Some people aren't asking because they're curious. They're asking to trap, dismiss, or argue. Engaging within isn't a dialogue. It's a drain. Picture babbles. If someone isn't ready to listen, walk away. It's not your job to educate everyone. Sometimes silence is power. 5. Create, don't just consume. Deep thinkers often spend a lot of time thinking. But too much internal processing can become a trap. Eventually, you need to build something with your thoughts. Write, speak, design, invent, mentor, or create. Your ideas have value, but they only create impact when they're expressed. Don't wait for perfection. Don't wait to be ready. Start sharing what you know, even if it's messy. The world doesn't just need thinkers. It needs thinkers who act. 6. Protect your mental environment. Not everyone deserves access to your moment. Be ruthless about what and who you allow in. This means curating your feed, limiting time with energy-draining people, protecting your solitude, being mindful about media. It also means recharging your moment, not just filling it. Go into nature. Read things that have nothing to do with your niche. Watch documentaries. Practice stillness. Reflect. You can't think deeply if your brain is constantly in fight or flight mode. 7. Accept that you'll be misunderstood. And do it anyway. History's greatest thinkers were misunderstood, criticized, ridiculed, or worse. If you're saying something truly new, people won't recognize it at first. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're early. Criticism is not always a signal to stop. Sometimes, it's a sign you're onto something. 8. Find meaning in the struggle. There's a cost to thinking deeply. Isolation, frustration, restlessness. But there's also beauty in it. You get to see the world with clarity. You get to connect dots that others miss. You get to live with awareness, which is the root of all freedom. The pain you feel? It's the price of seeing. But once you accept that, something magical happens. You stop resisting the loneliness and start using it. You write from it. You create from it. You lead from it. Because deep thinkers don't just analyze the world, they shape it. Final thoughts. If you've ever been told you're too much, too intense, or too serious, good. That probably means you're on the right track. We live in a world that often rewards noise over nuance, speed over wisdom, conformity over depth. But the pendulum always swings. Eventually, the world remembers that it needs thinkers, builders, seers. And when that moment comes, it won't look for the loudest voice. It'll look for the deepest one. That could be yours. But only if you stay in the game. So don't dim your light. Don't shrink yourself to thin. Don't water yourself down to be mood adjustable. Instead, get sharper, get smarter, get more patient. And above all, keep thinking. Because the world might not see your value now. But the future? That's a different story.